Hello and welcome to this webinar where we upgrade an old Delphi application to the newest Delphi version. I'm Marco Geuze, Embarcadero MVP. You can reach out to me via email marco@gdksoftware.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, and if you're not subscribed yet, please do subscribe to our mailing list. You get a lot of valuable Delphi related content. So, very briefly about GDK Software. We are a software company developing Delphi applications with two offices here, one in the Netherlands, one in the UK. We do a lot of Delphi development work, but also a lot of Delphi upgrades, and that's the topic for today. So let's quickly go over to the next slide. So what we're going to do today is we're going to upgrade an old Delphi application to the newest Delphi version. This will be a hands-on demonstration how we upgrade to the latest Delphi version. But before we do that, a little bit on theory, on the things you have to be aware of when upgrading an old Delphi application. So I'm not a specialist. We have a pragmatic approach to these upgrades. So if you have very technical questions about these upgrades, you can always send me an email and I'll pass it on to one of our Delphi experts. So in the next minutes, we'll go over a couple of things you'll encounter when you upgrade a Delphi 7 application. But first, where to start or how to start? It might be knocking on an open door, but of course you need to make sure that you have all the source code available for your application. And that's not only the source code for your application itself, but also maybe for components you're using. We see a lot of components that were in use back in the days, back in 2007 or Delphi 7 or even older. And if the companies who build these components are not existing anymore, you might have a problem. So it's always good to have the source code available for your application, of course, but also for the components, because if you can't upgrade to the latest components version, you can always upgrade your Delphi 7, for example, Delphi 7 components. So what we always try to do is convert a Delphi application as is. So when you have a Delphi 7 application or a Delphi 7 or Delphi 5 application and you want to convert it to the latest Delphi version, don't make any other changes than just the upgrade. And we do this because in Delphi, what you want to do is compare the Delphi 5 or Delphi 7 application alongside the new converted Delphi, right now Delphi 10.4 version. So you don't want to make any other changes than just the upgrade, because that's the only way you know if there's something broken in the latest version, if it's due to the actual upgrade, or maybe if you in the meantime also change component sets. You never know what exactly the source of this error is. So what we always try to do is convert as is, as much as possible. Sometimes it's not possible, but we try to do it as much as possible. Good. So a little bit of theory right now. Unicode. One thing you'll have to be aware of is if you convert a Delphi application which was built in a version before 2009 and you convert it to 2009 or later, so basically to the latest Delphi version even, you have to be aware of the changes regarding Unicode. So for quite a long time, Delphi included two separate data representation of characters. So you had previously in the old Delphi versions, so before 2009, you had the white char, white string, and you had an NC char, NC string. So the NC char, that's an 8-bit representation of a character. So basically what you do have with an 8-bit representation is that you have 265 different symbols within one char. And what exactly it is depends on your code base, your code page. So with white char, that's a 60-bit representation. So you have 64,000 different symbols in the character set. So it's a lot more. In this respect, nothing has changed between the old Delphi version, so Delphi 5 or 7 or 2007, or the newer Delphi version, so from 2009. What has been changed though is the default char and the default string. So previously the string and the char were an alias of ANSI char and ANSI string. With the newer Delphi versions, you still have the char and the string, but now they are an alias of the white char and white string. So I'll show you a couple of things in Delphi to make sure you understand the difference. So here we are. So this is just a very simple example. Right now here we have, for example, a buffer, an array of char. So with Delphi 7, this would be an array of ANSI char. With Delphi 2009 and later, this is a white char array. So although if you just use it as it is right now, it should work quite fine. But still, say you'll have you'll use a fill char function, and you just use the length of the buffer, you'll get an error in the newest Delphi versions because this is not valid anymore. The length is depending on the size of the char. So you'll have to multiply, in this case, multiply with the size of the char to get a correct length of the buffer. A couple of other things you'll have to be aware of is when you're loading and saving from files, for example, or saving to a database, or basically connecting to another system than your own application. Because if you just use chars and strings as is, probably it will just work. If you save files in an old version, load them in a new version, you can come across a couple of things like this, so that you have a file saved in an old ANSI char or string format. You want to open it again, and you'll have to then specify, and that's why the t-encoding class will come in hand. You'll have to open it in the right encoding, basically. And with the newer Delphi versions, you can specify which encoding you want to use when loading or saving files. So that's something to be aware of. You'll get a couple of warnings, for example, if you convert to the latest Delphi version and you have a char set. But you can change this. Well, basically the warning already gives the solution, so you have to use the char and set. So there are a couple of these things to be aware of. But yeah, as long as you know that the char previously was an alias of ANSI char and now it's white char, and the same applies for string, you know where to look for if you want to apply solutions for this. So that's a little bit about chars and Unicode, basically. The next thing we'll have to talk about is the BDE. So the Borland database engine is a deprecated old way of accessing databases. If you're still using the Borland database engine, I would recommend to migrate away from the BDE as fast as possible. But the thing is, if you're on Delphi 7, you want to migrate to FireDeck, you can't, because FireDeck is not in Delphi 7, is not available in Delphi 7, so you have to upgrade first to the latest Delphi version. Luckily, you can do that because the BDE is still available in the latest Delphi version. So again, we always try to convert as is. So one way of getting rid of the BDE would be to take your Delphi 5 or Delphi 7 application, convert it to the latest Delphi version, including the BDE, and as a next step, immediately remove the BDE and convert from BDE to FireDeck. So luckily, there are a couple of good guides on the internet on how to migrate from the BDE to FireDeck, and I'll show you the guide from Embarcadero. So migrating BDE applications is not that difficult. You can use a tool provided by Embarcadero, and the tool is Refind, which is located in the program files. And you can use the Refine tool to basically change all your Pascal and DFM files, so it will point to FireDeck instead of the BDE. And it uses this list of solutions, so I'll open this here. So as you can see, this is basically just a text file the Refine tool uses to migrate from the BDE to FireDeck. So first it unuses a couple of things, and then it migrates from all these classes, for example, so from a T database to a TFD connection, from a T table to a TFD table, and so on. So if you run this Refine tool using this list of changes, your complete application will be changed from the BDE to FireDeck. Of course, you're not there yet, so you have to do a couple of other things. You'll have to add a connection definition to make sure that you can access a database. You'll have to add this to your project file, and you'll have to maybe provide some data mappings if the data mappings have been changed or aren't available in the new database format. But that's not too difficult. So using this guide, it is quite easy to migrate from the BDE to FireDeck, or and to maybe another database, or well, keeping the same database depending on what you're using. But I strongly recommend to do this once you're on the latest Delphi version. So that's the BDE. A little bit about components. As I said before, we always try to, when we do a conversion, we always try to convert as is. With components, that might be difficult, because if you have a DevExpress component set in Delphi 7, these are based on the DX grid, for example, and all the DX component sets. And the newest Delphi version and the newest DevExpress version uses CX grid and has a complete different structure. So how we do this is we try to do this in steps. Sometimes it's just possible to go to the newest Delphi version and the newest component set, so quick reports might be easy, or any other component set. If you have the source code, you can even upgrade your component as well. But for some components, you have to take a couple of steps. So let's say you have DevExpress and you want to migrate to the latest Delphi version. What we try to do then is to take the latest component set available for, let's say, Delphi 7, upgrade first to the latest component set, then try to migrate to Delphi 2007, so pre-Unicode. Again, take the latest component set and move on just in a couple of steps to the latest Delphi version. And then it is easier to migrate the components as well, because if every time you go to a new Delphi version, you take the latest version of the component set, and sometimes you can even apply the upgrade tools component makers deliver. So it's not always easy to do, but as long as you have the source code of a component, it's almost always possible to convert the component as well. And components, of course, you need, if you have them in your old application, you'll need them in the latest Delphi version as well. So that's it about theory. Let's go to some demos. I already mentioned the Refind utility, so you can use that command line utility to convert a Delphi application to the latest Delphi version and add your own class definitions, add your own changes in this Refind utility. We do it a little bit different. We have developed our own tool to help us with converting Delphi projects. So we have already done quite some conversions from even Delphi 3 to the latest Delphi version, but most of these were Delphi 5 and 7, sometimes Delphi 2007. And we have a tool available. I'll show you later on where you can get it. We have a tool available where you can use the tool to automate, well, part of it, not everything, but you can automate part of the conversion process. And I'll give you I'll give you a brief demo of the tool in a minute. So how this tool works is that we try to compile your project in the latest Delphi version. Of course, you get a couple of compiler errors, and what we do is we have a complete database of, I think, over 500 solutions right now. We search in this database for the exact compile error, and we have a solution database as well. So we try to find the compile error. We look into our database which solution we have to apply in the source code, and we apply it, and then we do the compilation again, and we find the next error, try to compile, get an error, and find the solution in the solution database again. And we do this over time. So every time you restart basically the compilation process, and in the end, if we know all the solutions, you will end up with a Delphi, right now Delphi 10.4 version of your application. Sometimes you can't find any solution because these are specific code lines or structures that you have in your software, and then you can add these specific solution, and I'll show you later on how to do this. Add the solutions to the duster tool we have, and then the next time you encounter the same error in maybe another application or even the same application, the duster tool knows what to do and how to solve this specific error, applies it to the source code on that specific point, and restart the compilation again. So right now I'll give you a live demo of the tool. So let's head over to not to Delphi. Let's close this down. But to the duster tool. There you go. So a very brief overview of the tool. You have to define a username and key for it. I'll show you later on where to get it. A project file, you can add the solutions, we'll show you later on. Choose if you want to run a debug or release configuration, and the next two steps are pre-process and compile. For this demo, I found an online open source audio tools library, which consists of a couple of projects, and they are all in Delphi 7 still. So let me make sure that I have the version from, in this case, GitHub, I think, which is a Delphi 7 application. And if we try to run this in Delphi, you'll get errors because I don't know actually what it is. Well, you have a couple of classes that are not available anymore, and if we solve this, you get a lot of other errors, which has to do with the old Delphi version, and now we're trying to compile in the newest Delphi version. So let me first show you what's happening when we run this through the GTK duster tool. I already applied a couple of custom solutions for this project, so I know this will work, and it will convert the complete Delphi 7 application to Delphi 10.4. So I'll first run it, and then I'll explain what's happening and how you can add custom solutions to your project. So I'll click now on compile. So this is the same project, and when I click on compile, we use the Delphi compiler to compile the application in 10.4. Now, well, if you do this, you get a lot of errors from the Delphi compiler. But the thing is, we know exactly what's happening here and what kind of solutions we have to apply for these errors. So let's say well, this is one of the errors and one of the solutions. Let me find another one which might better explain actually what we're doing. So let's go to the top first. Okay, so you'll see the first error, which is the same as we saw when we did a compilation in Delphi. This unit couldn't be found, but I know this unit is obsolete and we don't need it. So what I've done here is replace this or removed the uses basically from the project. We also get a couple of other errors, for example, like this, so where you get an incompatible types with the ANSI char and white char, or the pointers to these. We know already, well, I didn't know what to do, so we applied another solution, which was replacing an identifier with a default Delphi action. So in the end, you'll do this a couple of times, and then you'll end up with a Delphi 7, let me close down Slack, with a Delphi 7, a Delphi 10.4 application. So now when I compile this project again, you'll see that it's working. I'll still get a couple of warnings, so we can solve these as well with the duster tool, but now we have a available application in Delphi 10.4, and let me just see if it runs. I thought I had a file available. Yeah, I do, and this is working. So let me now go back to the duster tool and do again the conversion, because that's one of the benefits of using the duster tool. You can just redo the complete conversion, and that makes sense if you're still developing the old Delphi 7 application. You can just start on the conversion project and do it again and again, and when you're done with adding all your custom defines, then you can do the actual conversion, so you don't have to stop developing the old Delphi 7 application. Right, so let's have a look at the solutions, the custom solutions, so not one of the 500, but the custom solutions for this project. So what we are doing is, well, let me first show you what happens if we don't know a solution. So let's say I'll basically remove, or I'll change the compile message error. So if we do the, if we try to compile this project, it will find a couple of solutions, but not all, because this one isn't recognized anymore. So let me save this one and run it again. So now I click on compile, and as you know, we've reverted the process. So now I expect the compiler, the duster tool, to stop on a certain point. So, and that's now. Because this is giving an error, so incompatible types. The only thing is, we couldn't find a solution for this because I just removed it. So now let's head over to Delphi again and do the compilation. Right. So if you're doing a conversion process, you will end up with these kind of problems. So you have source code which is compiling partly in Delphi 10, but then you'll encounter an error, and you need to fix this error to go further. So in this case, you get an error here on this specific line within incompatible types, and that's correct because this function now returns an integer instead of a boolean. So in the previous Delphi version, maybe this was a boolean, and now it's an integer. So I do already know what to change because I've done this before. So normally you would figure out what exactly there should be in here. So instead of the true, this can be, for example, a 0 or a 1. So in this case, 0. And this would be enough to compile. But the only problem right now is you don't want to do this manually, because every time you'll encounter this specific structure, you have to change manually from true to 0. So what we want to do is find this exact, let me revert this, find this exact location, and regardless, for example, or of what's in here, so what kind of parameters there are, everywhere where we have a file set attribute, you want to change this to 0. So you can just use a find replace, but we can do it a little bit more sophisticated. So let's say we have this text. I'll just copy it right now. And we want to make sure that we replace the true with a 0, regardless of what's in here. You can use regular expressions for that. So I don't know if you know regular expressions. These are very powerful. I won't go into much detail right now because that's a complete webinar topic if you want to explain regular expressions. But for now, I'll go over to to a website where you can test these regular expressions. So I've already set up these expressions, but basically what they are doing is they're a very sophisticated way of searching and replacing texts. So in this case, I want to find the file set attribute regardless of the parameters where there is a true in here. And I want it to replace this with the same parameters, of course, with a 0. And now if I just test this source code, I've pasted it in here, you see our search string works because it finds the file set attribute, it regards the file name as a parameter, and it just replaces this regardless of what's in here. So if this would be something completely different, it still works. So if we do have a different parameter, the replacement works. So what we can do with the duster tool is add this, and I've done that already, to the solution list. So in case we find this incompatible types and this requirement can be found, so the file set attribute, we can replace it with the 0 in this case. So here you can add a solution based on regular expressions. So we do have all kinds of actions available. So in case you find a unit you have to add to the interface section, or you have to comment out a line, or you have to replace things, you can do that by using the action type in the duster tool. So in this case we do a replace via regex, and if I save this and compile it again, you'll see that it now finds the correct solution for this. So we're using this tool to help us with the compilation process and to make use of the Delphi compiler to convert from an old Delphi version to the latest Delphi version. So there are a couple of other things which are quite useful in here. Very briefly, so you can use the pre-process option to replace a couple of things you know on beforehand, so without using the compiler. Or let's say you have binary DFM files, you can, with the pre-process, you can convert these to text DFM files, because you need these you need these as text files if you want to do the conversion process. So I think that's it for now. You have, by the way, you have a very convenient way of adding errors to the list of solutions. So that's something which is very useful when you're in the middle of a conversion project. So that's it for now, I think, for the demo of the tool. And it's also the end of the webinar. I'll just show you one last slide. And that is where you can find our GTK duster tool. So if you're interested in the tool, head over to this location and you can purchase the tool there. Of course, you can even purchase extra development hours from us if you want. So if you want to get a flying start, well, you can always reach out to us, and we're happy to help wherever we can. So again, the link for the Delphi hero list, if you're not subscribed yet, please do. It's always good to see other Delphi developers. So that's it. Thanks for now, and see you next time. Bye.